quick the background on Kratos, right? So Kratos provides solutions for ground station infrastructure, for satellite operators, for all of our services that have satellites enabled within. So for us here, we're predominantly featuring three pieces for new technologies for us. We've certainly seen the challenges for high throughput satellites and what that means as it relates to monitoring and the overall segmentation of the ground system itself. So we have a new Series 200 add-on to our historic Monix enterprise product to feature then monitoring and management for spot beam monitoring. Obviously, inside of that, then there's been a huge proliferation of VSAT terminals and the interference associated with VSAT terminals. So we are launching a new product called SatGuard here as well that will focus on identification of the interfering VSAT terminals, so that we can then identify what they are, identify the terminal ID associated with them, and then we'll look at continuing along our roadmap plan of being able to then geolocate where they are geographically, so that somebody could then, very from a pinpoint way, identify the specific VSAT terminal that's causing the interference and be able to quickly shut that off, saving then, operational time that we're seeing with our customer base that takes to locate, a VSAT terminal, which could be in the, one of 100,000 that's out there. So how do you find those? And then the second piece inside the high throughput satellites and that approach then are changes to gateways and gateway infrastructure. So we're looking at and then providing new ways to optimize that gateway infrastructure from a satellite, from the satellite antenna all the way back through the ground station infrastructure itself, and then providing a complete solution to look at that for gateway infrastructure pieces. So excited about those three pieces of our puzzle here. Yeah, I'd say that, when you look at, both challenges and kind of the comprehensive nature of this, I mean, this was an early region for HTS satellites, and then the need to kind of protect those, and obviously being in a regulated area from the TRA, how do I look at regulation and regulatory aspects around providing connectivity and spectrum inside this? So I've got a monitoring side of that from a regulated piece, and then with HTS satellites on that side, really what that spot beam or where those monitoring are. So again, kind of playing into the product lines that we're offering here at the show. Those are some of the unique things. So it's a highly regulated area that was early to HTS, which and a proud organizations, across from a country to country standpoint. Adding into that some of, certainly what we've seen from a military standpoint, even within inside of that, all the way down to protected communications and what does that need to look like as it relates to kind of national waveforms, and how do I then protect the overall signs and activities within inside of that. So you get into the infrastructure communication pieces. Some of those now are becoming unique country by country. And the legacy of Kratos and what we have from a protected communication standpoint plays, uniquely into some of the challenges that we're seeing here in the region for sure. I mean, we see the growth. I mean, it's double-digit growth, that we're seeing from an analyst perspective in here. And so, CABSAT is a big, show and event for us here. And then there's many other. I mean, we've been a local, supplier to many of the regulators here in the region. Recently I've opened up an office in Saudi Arabia, so there's now a Kratos Arabia office. So we'll continue to see kind of the extension of our footprint from an infrastructure standpoint to make sure that we've got the correct local presence to take and supply then some of these what we think are kind of unique solutions back to our customer base on this line. So certainly a lot of opportunity and a lot that fit right in the area where Kratos has always been focused. So it works out well for us. So the first thing for us from the challenge side is as you look at end-to-end communication infrastructure and what does it take to keep a satellite in orbit, down to communicating through an antenna, through the processing of the ground system, and overall monitoring that from an infrastructure standpoint, and then moving into the communication side of that business. How do I make sure that I monitor that services, the end-to-end service side of that are up and running? Because we're certainly seeing satellite to your traditional IT infrastructure being more and more combined into end-to-end services, and that's an area where we see the kind of the extension of the product lines that we have. And so being able to provide then a seamless path across the product lines that we have to provide an end-to-end visibility into those satellite-enabled services for protected communications, for overall bandwidth and analysis, and then overall from a service management standpoint is really where kind of the breadth of the product line that we have fits very well into what we see as kind of the growth here in the region. Now, interference and HTS are probably the biggest two that we always see. So we're certainly seeing and continue to see, and we see this really across the world, VSAT terminals being deployed. I mean, it's a great way for communications. You continue to see the cost and size of those units continue to get smaller. A couple weeks ago, you had big announcements from Kymeta where you got flat panel things that are going onto ships. You're going to put them onto cars. That's just more and more of these terminals then that are going to be within inside of the environment that we've got to look at, being able to A, identify, and B, manage the appropriateness of those pieces. So that's one side. Certainly then as you look at, the aero market and the extension of the mobility side from aero to maritime it's about the connected everything. And we just see then that satellite then becomes a very good, clean way to deliver those services to those terminals, which then is just going to extend then what we see as kind of, spot beams and what we need to do with inside that from an HTS and a bandwidth standpoint, what it means from an interference regulation standpoint, how do we make sure we monitor those, and then obviously overall, how do we then optimize the gateway? So again, kind of back to why we're putting these products out here at CABSAT this week. So it's exciting.